welcome to week 7. I went through and graded all the hard news stories. So I gave everybody individual feedback. If you go on Blackboard, if you haven't already, please go and take a look at the feedback that I gave you. It might be a little confusing too. I'm not sure how it looks on your end, but within the document in Blackboard, you'll see little markups or almost like little bubbles. And I think if you click on them, that's what you need to do. It will open it up and give the individual feedback on the part of the story that I'm trying to direct your attention to. So that's my long way of saying, make sure you go to Blackboard, look within the document in Blackboard, and there's real specific individual feedback within the document too, not just the comments that I leave for the grade. But look, it's not easy to do, especially if this was your first time, right? And that was the point. I wanted you to go out, experiment a little bit, start to put some of these lessons to practice, and now I can give you specific feedback, and that will then help you learn what you need to do to move on to the next one, right? And then from there, you'll make different kinds of mistakes, and that will help you need to know what you do for the one after that. So it's really about now just making these mistakes and then learning from it, because that's the only way that you're going to get better and understand how to write news stories. You know, it's a different kind of style of writing that many people are used to. So with that said, I gave you individual feedback, but let me give some just general feedback to the class. So I'm going to go over a few points here that not unique to this class either, but that I see pop up often with students. I saw maybe, I don't want to say the majority of the class, but many of you struggle with. So I want to address it as an entire class, because even if you didn't make this mistake this time, I know that you could be prone to doing it in the future. So I'm going to go through my little checklist here. One is to keep on a hard news story. So we are going to be transitioning into feature stories, and that's a little bit different. But for a hard news story, you do want to keep the lead directly to the actual story and get that information right there in that first line. So here's what I mean. I'll give you an example right now. I'm going to pull up, it's over here. All right, remember that article we were looking at the first time we were talking about hard news stories? So in the lead here, and it's about, this was a couple years ago, but it was in Thailand, that soccer team, a bunch of young boys that got stuck in the cave, right? So they go into the lead. Expert divers Sunday rescued 4 of 12 boys from a flooded cave in northern Thailand, where they were trapped with their soccer coach for more than 2 weeks as a dangerous and complicated operation unfolded when heavy rain and the threat of rising water underground. Very long lead. Most of your leads will not be this long, though. Notice they did keep it to one sentence, so that was another comment that I gave many of you. Leads are one sentence. But this was a very long one sentence, but it's all right. They kept it to that. And here, notice what they did, though. The lead is directed to that specific story. Now, this rescue has been going on for a while, right? Notice that the lead doesn't give you background about, and in a hook about the story is like, I'm just trying to think of something off the top of my head, but kids that are stuck in a cave are still struggling. How will they get out? We'll find out. Something like that. That is, first of all, I know what you were trying to do. If you wrote leads like that, you're trying to hook the reader to move on. But in a hard news story, you're not really doing that. In the hard news story, the lead is just giving as much of the who, what, when, where, why, how, right, as possible. So you're trying to get that within the lead. Let the story unravel and explain to you like the context and why this story is special or unique. You're not trying to describe that in the lead. Hopefully that made sense. Let me give maybe I should try to think of another example here in that lead. I got a better one for this type of story. Your lead should not be something like, did any of the boys make it out in the cave? Question mark, and then try to go into your story. Again, I know what you were trying to do, try to spark the reader's interest, and I get that. But that's not really the function of a hard news story. Of a hard news story, you're just trying to get the news out there. So that lead has to be direct to the actual story, and it has to give you the information of that specific story, not as the whole story as a whole either, right? That specific story. I'm trying to think of another example, maybe one from a student, without, of course, giving anybody's names. But all right, I don't even remember who wrote this one. Do not think that I'm saying this, that you're the only one that did this issue. I saw it come, like I said, on several stories, but this is just the one that popped up in my head. One of the stories was about homelessness in a town, in Middletown. So it was about an event where every Sunday You could come and people that are homeless could come and like get food and goods and whatever, get help, right? So the lead was something along the lines of homelessness in Middletown and in the country is a big problem. Then it broke into this specific, day, which you could do if the homelessness is a problem in Middletown, is you can come and, they got these backpacks for the day and people, right? So the lead though should not have been about homelessness being a problem in Middletown or Connecticut. The lead is, this is the event that happened. Homeless people came on this day to get these kinds of things, and whatever. They helped 30 people that day. Blah 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 blah. Then you can break into how homelessness is a problem across the country, and Middletown's not unique, right? So did that make a little bit more sense? Maybe the lead has to be unique, specific to the actual event you're covering, not to the whole problem. Okay. All right. Let me move on to another. I'm just looking at my little cheat sheet here. All right, background information. That kind of goes to the second problem, and that's why these are all tied together into the nut graph, and putting background information into the nut graph. So let's take this story again. Right? Let's say we did have a good solid lead here about this one. Let's say this was the lead, so it's a good lead. We understand what the story is about. Remember now, the nut graph goes into more details about the actual, specific story that you're covering for that hard news story. So what the events that happen in that moment, on that day, whatever it is that you're trying to say is like the update. What ends up happening is, I feel like, and I used to do this too, and I know that, but students will then want to try to give a background because they say, they won't understand everything, right? So you give this lead, and then the nut graph will start talking about Thailand is located in blah, 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 blah. It is the 10th biggest country that, has, I'm trying to think what was the problem here, the landslides, or it has, over 50 landslides every year that get people stuck. And you give like a background information. And then somewhere around here, you get back to the story. Remember, if you're trying to talk about the history of something, the background information, that goes in the background down here. I know it seems a little counterintuitive because you want to build up, but again, think of inverted pyramid is reverse, right? So you're starting off very specific. Think of an inverted pyramid. I'm trying to show you my screen here, right? And goes out like this, right? So I'm sorry, you're going very broad. You're going give us all the details, and as you get in, you can get specific with background information and more details that are, I guess, good to know, but not crucial to that specific story, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is lead and nut graph, think of it as what is going in, what needs to be told for this specific event that's in the bigger story of bigger context of the story. What do we need early on up here related to this story exactly? Then as you go down, now you can start giving me background about landslides that happened in Thailand, and maybe you have some other fact about how many people this has happened to over the last year or whatever. Now you can get all that information, right? How big the cave was, that can all be down here, because again, that's just more in general information, not specific information to that story. All right, quotes. I know this is an AP style, we've talked about it, but I'm going to bring your attention to it again because I kept seeing this. Let's take a look at this quote right here. The operation went much better than expected, comma, quotation mark, said, Chiang Rai. I don't know if that name, I'm sorry if I said that name incorrectly, but what I want to point your attention to though is here, comma, quotation mark. So first aspect is that, remember, everything goes within the punctuation. And I think you guys actually were very good at that. Where some of you struggled was this. If the sentence is continuing, so anytime you have a said or, it's usually going to be said, you're attributing it to someone, right? It has to be a comma because this is really still part of the same sentence. So anytime this is continuing, it's going on. I'm trying to find out an example that they have where the quote ended. Let's say, I don't see one where, we're right here. On Sunday night, Thai's Navy SEALs posted a celebratory note on Facebook page saying, right? Then they have the quote, and notice there's nothing else continuing after that, right? It's a period. That's when you put the period in the quotation mark. Now they could have something after still too. Let's say they have that and then they start a new thought. Navy SEALs were so overjoyed that they, all hugged and celebrated together. If you put that right after there, you still keep the period because this sentence isn't connected with the following one that's coming, right? So what you have to practice doing is if you're attributing it to somebody, if you're saying somebody said, or you have something that continues on with that quotation, you're using a comma in the quotation marks. If it ends and that's the last thought that somebody said, it's period, and then you can start your new sentence. I noticed that sneak every once in a while. Along with those lines too, I did not say this yet, and I don't actually honestly remember if your book says it, but so I'll say it right now. You don't have to try to get cute with changing the attribution. So, Joe Smith, I had a great day, Joe Smith said, or, said Joe Smith, however you want to do it. And then the next one, it was so memorable to go to that place. He joyfully exclaimed, right? And that's what you use. You don't have to keep trying to switch that up. I know, again, it seems counterintuitive to our writing because we always want to change our writing style or mix things up in our writing style so it's not boring that we have the same, that we're using the same words. But in journalism, it is okay just to say said. So anytime you attribute it, here's the quote, said Joe Smith. I really like this, said Joe Smith. Said. You can just keep saying the said. I'll give you the reasoning. This might be more details than you really need to know right now, but the reasoning being is that the quote is the exciting part of your writing. That's the part that you want people to focus on, right? So the said part is just so the reader can quickly understand who it was that said that. But that's not the part that you really want them focusing on. That's not the part that's really showing your unique writing style. The uniqueness of the story is the actual quote. So that's what you want to focus on. I don't know if I explained that as well as I could have. But when in doubt, just use said. Make the quote stand out, not the other piece, and try to put the pressure on yourself saying, well, how am I going to mix it up because I just said a minute ago? How am I going to think of a different way to describe this? You don't have to. Let the quote's doing the talking for you. So you don't have, the writer have the pressures off of you to try to mix up your words to make it, to keep the reader interested. The quotes are going to keep the reader interested. That's a better way to describe it. So long story short, just use said when you're attributing to somebody. You don't have to keep mixing it up. All right, last piece with quotes too, and I'm just looking at my little cheat sheet here so I remember. Last piece with quotes too, again, not something I covered, but let me cover it now, is lead with your quote. So notice this paragraph, they start off, the operation went much better than expected. Then they attribute it to somebody. Let's try to find another good one here. Don't be worried, wrote another boy, Mick. I miss everybody, Grim. They didn't say, look, notice how they did not start the paragraph with, Mick, one of the boys who was stuck in this cave, said, don't be worried. Again, it goes back to that principle that your quote is the most exciting part. Get that up front. The reader can quickly process all this. So they can read the quote and they won't be saying, don't be worried. Wait a minute, who said that? Now I'm so confused. I have no idea what's going on in this story. They didn't tell me who's, they start with the quote and then you attribute to the person and the reader then can quickly piece it together. So you do that because, again, the quote is the most exciting part. And when you start putting things of, who the person is and you take 3 lines to lead that up, the reader kind of like almost zones out. It's sad to say, but the umph of the actual quote gets lost. I'm not saying that you do it every single time, and there's times that you break that rule and all that, and you're not going to see every journalist do it that way all the time, but you will notice most of them will, and it's because of that reason. It has that effect. Lead with your quote. It's what stands out. Then attribute it right after. The person will quickly make the connection and understand the context, within a beat, right? It's not going to throw them off by not starting off with this whole lead up of who's saying what. All right, we're doing well here. We just got a few more to go through. Let's see, number 5. Lead with a quote. I talked about that. 6. Break up your paragraphs. Real quickly on this one. Again, paragraphs are short. 1 to 3 sentences. Maybe get away with 4, but one sentence. one, one. I think this one is one. Look, man, they're really keeping one. You'll see some of them in here will have two. But break up, here we go. Here's a couple, right? Two or three. One, two, three sentences. Right? So that pretty much looks like the biggest one here. You get my point though. Short paragraphs. If the thoughts are related, but there's some kind of transition in there, break it up. So for example, if you say something like, Mary Smith played this sport her whole life. She was a great athlete. She knew though that she had to leave the game. Well, she knew that she had to stop playing when she hurt her knee, right? So look, it's all related, right? She was a great athlete. She played this sport her whole life. She knew she had to leave this sport when she hurt her knee, though. I know it's all related, but think of the natural transition in there. She knew she had to leave the sport when she hurt her knee. Kind of a new thought, right? You're transitioning the reader into something else. Break it up, right? That should be a new paragraph then. Those first two sentences could have been one paragraph. The she hurt her knee, a new paragraph. Anytime you have any kind of thought of like a new quote, a new person being introduced, you're starting to pivot the story. So now it's going to start to change a little bit. Break it up. And again, when in doubt, break it up. 1, 2 sentences, paragraphs, probably where most of you are going to fall. 1, 2, even 3. But I try to have you avoid 3 because then you're going to want to put everything as 3. So 1, 2, 3. If you're doing 4, sometimes there's a need for it, but that means you could probably break it up. So practice breaking up those paragraphs. Some of those paragraphs still way too long, and it's very natural. You're used to writing in essay format where there's 10 sentences or more to a paragraph. I understand that. So it's a really different way of writing, but look, just take a look at how the AP did it here. Nice short paragraphs. Again, it gives the reader time to process each section. When it comes to print, it helps not be a block of text on a piece of paper, and on web too. We're looking at this on our phones. You're not having to scroll for 2 minutes before it's a new paragraph. It's just this style of writing. Okay, so short paragraphs. Let's see what we got up here. I think we got one more to go. One more. I didn't take points off or anything for this. Most of these I didn't because these are new. That's why I'm introducing them to you. But something you wouldn't know is avoid exclamation marks within the story. Very rare that you're going to see an exclamation mark, even for a quote, even if it's within a quote. Even the person seemed excited when they said it. The long answer to why you don't want to do it is, you remember, you as the journalist are trying to be as objective as possible. You're just reporting the facts. And if you put an exclamation mark, you could run the risk of, saying somebody's excited about something, and then like you quoted somebody and they're like, well, I wasn't excited about that. I'll give you an example. Maybe in this story, you interview one of the moms of the kids that are lost, and she says something, and then you put an exclamation mark because she says, I just want my boy out, right? Exclamation mark. So here's the quote from the mom. I just want my boy out, exclamation mark. And she could look at it later and go, and you could almost see it as being excited. Like she's excited, like, oh, I just want my boy out. This is going to happen. Where she says, no, that I said that, almost crying. I'm so sad. I don't know if that was the best example I used, but you attributed that she was excited, and the reader might interpret it as like, oh, she's excited. She's hopeful, right? Look, she's excited about this situation. I think this is good, or I hope this is going to work. Right? Maybe that's a better one. You write, I hope this is going to work, exclamation mark. So the reader looks at that and goes, oh, she's very hopeful. But maybe really the way she was saying it is almost like, she doesn't have any hope, and it's more a dire situation. The point is, it could be misinterpreted the way you use an exclamation mark. You might be thinking they're excited, or you might be saying that and understand that it's with a little like sorrow that she's saying it, but the reader doesn't. So you just completely avoid it with the exclamation mark. If you have to, you can use it in the writing. You can say, I hope that my boy gets out. She said after crying and with her head down. Now you're seeing that maybe that she's sad when she's saying that, or the vice versa. I hope my boy gets out, she said, hugging and smiling, running around, trying to encourage everybody. Now you're showing the reader what her emotions are and letting the reader determine, is she happy or sad? Again, I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to do these explanations without seeing you all, because I can't tell if this is going right over your head or if this is sinking in. But the bottom line lesson with it is avoid exclamation marks. Show the reader. Give us other details to show that the person is excited or sad or whatever it is. It's almost a way of being lazy, just giving exclamation marks, because, it's just kind of like a too general of a sense of this person's excited. Yay. Show me how they're excited. And then again, especially with like a feature story, you then give a little bit of their personality. By showing me their way of being excited, I'm learning a little bit more about this person too, which is a nice transition because we just finished with all of the feedback for the hard news story of this week. All right, so read chapter 10. Little different this week. You don't have a quiz tied to chapter 10. What you're going to do instead is read this feature story. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about when I say a feature story, chapter 10 will explain all of that. So read chapter 10, then read this feature story here. And then what your exercise this week is going to be is after the reflection, or answer this reflection question. So I'm going to go here. So you read chapter 10 about feature stories. You read this article in homework here. Reflection. You're going to answer these questions. Write about the lessons and the techniques you observe being applied from chapter 10. So after you read the article, you're going to now write generally, what are some of the lessons you learned about telling a good feature story, about a good profile story? How did you see being applied to the actual story that you just read? Talk about other lessons we've learned from the book that you observed being applied. So, and it can be anything that we've been learning up to this point. How are the lead, the way the nut graph was done, objectivity in the story, whatever else you saw from other chapters, you talk about that too. So it's chapter 10, and then the other lessons we've learned that have we built on, how have you seen those? Be specific though. So give me the exact line or section of the article when you reference you observe something being applied. So in other words, don't just say, it was a great lead. All right, even though the lead I know is the first sentence, but it was a great lead. Okay, tell me within the lead what was so great about it. What did they actually do? Or if you say, the quotes were really well done. They gave, they gave spice to the story. Well, tell me which quote it was. So write out the actual quote, and then tell me, why that specific quote was needed. Why it gave spice to the story, why it gave life to the story, right? So my point is, don't just give talk in generality, saying they did a great job being descriptive. Tell me what they said in what line or two that was so descriptive that you thought, I see the lesson they used about being descriptive here in the way that they used that language, right? Give me the specifics so I can actually go reference it in the article and then, see the connection that you made. And lastly, it has to be at least 500 words. You can use bullet points. You can, do it in different ways, but at the very end of it, it has to be at least 500 words. So, the way you set it up is fine. Just make sure that you hit that word count. All right. That is worth 25 points. And that's all you've got today. It's a little bit lighter of a week. All right, because I want us to transition into feature stories. I want you to, chapter 10 is very important because the next story is going to be a feature story that you're writing, a profile story. And actually, this is a good way to end too. I was going to actually give the feature assignment today, but because I think that you need to still go through chapter 10, I'm going to hold off. So what I'd like you to do though is start to think about somebody that you're going to want to interview. Because that is what we're doing next, a profile, which is part of is a feature story. A profile is a very specific type of feature story. So you're going to profile somebody. You're going to write about somebody that you're going to have to go interview. I'm going to ask you to avoid being close family friend, being you're a family member, being, your roommate. I want to get somebody outside your comfort zone, and I'm going to talk about that more next week, why I want you to do that. Of course, at the very end, unless the last names are the same, I won't have any way of enforcing that or knowing, but we'll talk about that next week. I'd like you to try to go a little outside your comfort zone and just find an acquaintance, maybe somebody that you know, but you don't know that well. So with that in mind, though, start to maybe think of some ideas, see if you could maybe set up an interview with that person, right? Find a time to interview them next week. I don't know, I'm just trying to get you to get those logistics so you don't run out of time. You'll have about 3 weeks to do it because I'm going to give you the spring break week. We're not going to count because I'm not expecting you to work during spring break. So you'll have about 3 weeks if you include spring break, but still, I don't want you to run too tight up into the deadline. So maybe start to think about something you want to interview. If you have a question about something, because I know I haven't released all the assignment details, and you just want to bounce an idea off of me, hey, I'm thinking about this person. Do you think this would fit the criteria? Go ahead and message me, and I could just say, yeah, that sounds good. You don't have to for this assignment with me, but if you want to just bounce that idea off of me early so you can schedule a time to interview them and you want to do that this week, go ahead and message me. All right, that covers everything for this week. As always, hit me up in the messages if you're not sure about something with some specific feedback that I gave you. If you want to run an idea by me about a feature story, about somebody you're going to profile, or anything else. But you guys got the first writing story out of the way. I always think it's the hardest one. That's why I do it that way. I want you to get that hard one out of the way, make some mistakes so we can all learn from it, see where the weak spots are so we can all learn from it as a class. And they should now just get, I don't want to say easier, but you're going to feel more comfortable. You're going to feel more comfortable doing this. You know what mistakes to look out for. You know where you struggle maybe, so you can really hone in on that. And that's what I want to see. I want to see us grow on each one of these. All right, nice job. I'll see you all next week.